Dr. Yusuf, Dr. Mark, I want to give you a chance to jump in here as well.
Thank you. First of all, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the most merciful, most compassionate. I would say that one of the most important and fundamental aspects of religion that it addresses the whys. Science addresses the hows, but this really is the realm of our religious traditions. And the Quran is, I think, very clear that tribulation is part of life on earth. There's a verse in the Quran that devout Muslims recite every day, which says, "Glory be to the one who created everything in opposites." And one of the ways that we know and appreciate what we have is by experiencing the opposite of what we have. An Arab proverb says that health is a crown on the healthy that only the sick can see. And so, you know, often we take blessings for granted. We don't really think about what we have. And it's the times of tribulation that really causes us to remember what we had. We're a very complaining species. We whine a lot. We really forget to be grateful. And one of the most important verses in the entire Quran is that if you're grateful, God will increase you in your blessings. But let the ingrates know that blessings can be lost and chastisement can be severe. The other thing that in our tradition, there's a verse in the second chapter that says, God will test you with something of fear and hunger and loss of wealth and diminishment of lives. So give glad tidings to the people who are patient, who when they are afflicted, they say, we belong to God and to God we return. Those have mercy upon them. And so when the Prophet was asked about plagues, he was actually asked about plagues, what were they? And he said that they are an invasion of the unseen world upon you. And then he said, but they're a mercy for believers. And I actually, in these days that because we've all got more time than we usually have, I mean, my brother, who's a lawyer for the state of California, suddenly he said, I've got 2 hours every day because he was commuting to San Francisco. So a lot of people are finding time. So I read a book that was written in the 14th century by a Palestinian scholar called The Virtues of Plagues and Epidemics. And it was all about the blessings that come with these grave tribulations. And one of our great scholars said, it's important in every tribulation to see 3 blessings. It could be worse. It's in your worldly matters and not your otherworldly matters. And it's this in this life and not in the next life. And that's reason to be grateful. I think from the Islamic tradition, it's probably closer to the book of Job, which is a good book to read for people these days. Because Job was a good and righteous man, and yet God tested him because the challenge was that he was only good and righteous because he had all these blessings. So if the blessings are taken away, then let's see how he behaved. And Job, and this is one of the purposes that my tradition gives for tribulation, is that it's for you to see who you are and to reveal yourself during those times. One of the most important things I think that Robbie talked about was humility, that this should be a time, and this one of the purposes of suffering is that it engenders and it activates these virtues within us. And one of them is the virtue of vulnerability and how we respond to that by being humbled and recognizing that. Helen Keller said that the world is indeed filled with suffering, but we can never forget that it's also filled with the overcoming of suffering. And so that's one of the things that we're seeing. They said there's an unprecedented coalition of doctors all over the world working together, which is amazing. And I think one of the things about these situations is that you really see the best and sometimes the worst of humanity. But you know, people talk about the social isolation, but there's actually a lot of connectiveness that's happening now. People are calling people they haven't called in a long time and checking on how people are who have elderly neighbors. I've been called several times because now I'm elderly, I guess, but people called me several times asking, you know, you're one of our elders. Do you need any help? Do you need? So I think that's one of the benefits of times like these.
You know, Hamza, that's a good point. We're physically required to be more distant from each other, but that also provides an opportunity for us to be spiritually closer to each other. And at a time of such harsh polarization, when citizens are not treating each other as fellow citizens, but as enemies because of their political disagreements, maybe it's not a bad thing. God always brings good out of evil. Maybe a good that will come out of this is a little more spiritual closeness, even across the lines of political or ideological division. People will recognize each other's humanity, feel that bond of kinship that comes from being fellow members of this species, fellow human beings. Those of us in our traditions, of course, recognize all of us as God's family. In the Jewish and Christian traditions, we have the idea of man being made in the very image and likeness of God, and that there's no more profound common bond than that. So why can't we at least be gracious to each other, decent toward each other? Maybe this will be an occasion when some of us will become a bit more generous toward each other, both in terms of what we normally think of as generosity, philanthropy, but also more generous in understanding each other, being willing to listen to each other, not read somebody out of the human race because they happen to disagree with us about politics or philosophy or religion or anything else.
It's a great point. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts as well. I mean, isolation is its own form of suffering. And of course, one of the things that has been most difficult about this crisis is that we've had to physically distance ourselves from each other. So in addition to some of Robbie's suggestions, how can we pursue spiritual connection in isolation?
Or no, maybe? Or Hamza, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things to remember is that mystics love nothing more than isolation. We have an entire tradition of anchorites who actually left the world in order to be more contemplative. And we have wonderful stories of the church fathers. Thomas Merton talks about these church fathers out in caves in Egypt that fled the world. One of the, in our tradition, the Prophet Muhammad said, towards the latter days, cling to your homes because there would be so much foulness. And one of the things that I've noted here is the air has just cleared up wonderfully, and it's quite stunning. We've had rain since the quarantine started. We haven't had rain for months, and we just got all this rain. And the first day of the quarantine, I went out and saw the most extraordinary double rainbow that I've ever seen, and I just felt expanded by that experience of just hope. So I think there's a lot of blessings that will come out of this. I have the same concerns that everybody else does. I think there are people that are suffering, the people that don't have the wherewithal to afford a week out of work, let alone 2 months, 3 months.
Terrible.
So, I mean, that's undeniably a very serious consideration.
Thanks, Danielle. I'd love to ask you all about trust, and that trust is vital for leadership in really any realm, whether it's religious, political, or organizational. And by many measures, many faith communities have lost credibility and trust in recent years for a whole variety of reasons. And I wanted to ask you what you saw as the opportunities for the restoration of trust through our response as members of a community of faith to this pandemic.
Well, in the Quran, it says that the human being was created in a state of anxiety. And we see that with the child when it first comes in the world. It was in the nice womb, everything was wonderful, nice temperature, the food was coming in, and suddenly it's in this terrifying place. But then the breast comes and the child's at peace. And one of the things that I used to do with my children, I have 5 boys, but I used to throw them up in the air, and they would love it until it got to the point where gravity came in, and they well, it was always acting on, but the point when right before they came down, they would suddenly be in this complete panic. But then when they saw they were coming back to me, they kind of suddenly became happy and cheerful again. And And times like these are those moments of panic where you have to remind yourself that we're in good hands. And that is trusting God. And I think for people of faith, this is really our practice. And I know Robbie and Dr. Cornell, I'm sure the rabbi, people that practice their faith every day, that's the exercise for times like these. Just like an athlete exercises for the competition, these are the times when our faith is tested, and that's why the preparation is so important. And so for people who don't have a practice, I think these can become very, very difficult times. But trusting God, it's every day. Our prophet said, if you wake up in the morning, don't expect to see the evening. And if you go to sleep at night, don't expect to see the morning, because we're all in a state of uncertainty. And the point, the readiness, as Hamlet said, is all. The point is to be vigilant and be aware that life is temporal and it's very fragile, and we have to really appreciate it while we have it, be grateful for it, and honor it in others. Well, I think also it's important to remember, I mean, my grandfather told me about the 1906 earthquake, which he lived through, the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic, the Depression, World War I and II. I think we've had a long run here in the West. And I think our parents and grandparents had seen a lot more of these types of crises. But around the world, there aren't healthcare systems. I lived with Bedouin in West Africa. If you got sick, there was no 911 to call. You either got well or you died. And I think we have to be immensely grateful, because we've got Uyghur internment camps, we've got the Kashmiris in shutdown. I mean, there's a lot of places where the suffering, this is not new to them. What we're going through, is far less than what many, many places have been going through for quite some time, and many of us have been blind to it. So I think it's a time also to remind ourselves. I think this is a great opportunity, one, to recognize how out of balance we are in our lives. I think people don't realize just how stressful a lot of modern life is in the United States. This is a time to really, it's like I told a rabbi friend of mine, Alon, who called me the other day, that this is like a 2-month Sabbath for us. So, I mean, there really is something to think deeply about.
This question is for Hamza, who our listener writes, as a Muslim, prayers, and especially Friday prayers, where attendance at, which is under normal circumstances, an obligation for most Muslims, the close proximity of worshipers makes the spread of coronavirus a near certainty. Can Hamza Yusuf comment on this?
We actually issued what's called a Fatwa. I'm on the Fatwa Council in the United Arab Emirates, and we issued a Fatwa about this. In times like this, it's permitted to cancel, because preservation of life is one of the 5 universal. Actually, Robbie George wrote about this in a wonderful essay about the purposes of religion, and he pointed out that preservation of life, which concurs with our tradition, is one of the most important and fundamental ideas, and also that for the greater good, the individual will sacrifice. So for Muslims now, most of the countries are saying not to congregate. There are some scholars, there's always going to be difference of opinion. Like the Jewish tradition, you get 3 rabbis or 3 imams, you have 4 opinions. Truth to that. So there are some dissenters that want people to go to Jummah, but the Quran says, ask experts. And so in this case, we have to defer religiously to the epidemiologists who are telling us what to do.
So we've had 2 or 3 people write in with a question about what you are reading or recommending for reading in these times of isolation. Would love to hear from each of you.
Hamza.
Right now, well, I have a scriptural amount that I read every day just as a practice. So I continue to do that. Like I said, I read a book on the virtues or the benefits of plague, which was very interesting, written by a man who lived through a few plagues. I'm also rereading some Jane Austen right now. She's a very, for me, she's an anagogical writer. She's a deeply spiritual writer. A lot of people miss that aspect of Jane. But and then I just finished Moby Dick again, which was an incredibly rewarding experience. I think one of the tragedies of having to read things in high school and college is that you're really not ready for them. So it's very important to reread them when you have enough life experience. And Moby Dick was a complete eye-opener for me about the very things that Dr. Cornell was talking about earlier, about the hierarchy and social injustice and this madness that the head of this ship, which is going to take everybody to destruction. And I found out, because I wanted to know where he got the name Moby Dick, and I actually found out that it was after Austin Beale, who had a ship called the Moby Dick, and he was smuggling slaves on this ship out of the South, and he was doing this in the 1850s in Boston. So I thought that was interesting. Can I just make, and I'll end with this, I just want to make a correction. I think Dr. Cornell mentioned Islam with the idea of being angry at God, and I just wanted to say that in our tradition, there's a verse in the Quran: God will not be asked about what God does, but you will be asked about what you do. So as devout Muslims never question the judgment of God or the circumstances that God puts us in. We're just told to respond in the best way.
No, I appreciate that though, brother. That's one of the differences between you precious Muslims and we wild left wing of the Reformation Baptists. You know, we got a whole lot of free will that we are exercising.
The religion's not called surrender for nothing.
Yeah, right. Islam, surrender. You know, on readings, if I can jump in on readings, Hamza's reference to Moby Dick just reminds me that, gosh, this is a great opportunity to do something that many of us have wanted to do for a long time, but just didn't think we had the time, which is take on a big reading project like Moby Dick. That's a big project to read Moby Dick, or one of the great Russian novels, right? There are probably a lot of people out there who know they should at some point read something by Dostoevsky, or perhaps one of the great Solzhenitsyn novels, or something by Tolstoy, but just don't have the time to do something like that. Well, maybe now's the opportunity. In a certain sense, it's a gift, the opportunity to do that, to take on a project like that.
Can I just add to Dr. George's about prayer? I personally have a lot of friends who are physicians. I was once a registered nurse, so I know what it's like. I worked in intensive care and ER and burn unit. So I think to pray for the people.
Right.
My own son is working in an ambulance, taking older people. So he worries about just being infecting anybody. So I think praying for these people, because they really are the heroes in this situation. And Dr. Aisha Subhani, who Dr. George knows, I mean, she's seen some of her colleagues succumb just because they've been exposed. Yeah, and so just keeping them in our hearts and prayers, because they really are extraordinary people. Many of them are going above and beyond, and so praying for them, I think, means a lot to them, as well as hopefully God hears our prayers.
Yes, that's so important, Hamza. Thank you for bringing that out. And while we're at it, let's pray for anybody who's out there on the front lines taking risks. This includes, the people who are at the checkout counter in the grocery stores, because the grocery stores are still operating, sanitation workers, clergy, anybody who doesn't have the luxury, because of their vocation, doesn't have the luxury that I, for example, have, just being able to stay in my house and occasionally go out for a nice walk in the open air. There are people out there who have to have human contact because they're serving human needs, and gosh, do they deserve and need our prayers.
I think also the poets have a lot to offer us. There's a poem by Rumi where he says, "This being human is a guest house, every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected guest. Welcome and entertain them all. even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house, empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably, maybe clearing you out for some new delight, the dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them all at the door, laughing, and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. And I think there's an immense amount of truth to that, is to recognize the gifts that come with the trials also.
Because everywhere, this planet seems to be in turmoil, not just in human turmoil, but natural turmoil. And there's a relationship, and this is what modern people deny. They deny the relationship between human behavior and between the natural world. But the ancients all understood this. They understood this. They understood Ate, they understood Nemesis, the Greeks understood it, the Hindus understood it, the Buddhists understood it, the Muslims understood it, the Christians, the Jews, they all understood it. Modern man doesn't understand it. Modern man is in denial. Modern man thinks that his actions have no impact, as long as he's not hurting anybody. No, our actions have great impact, and we're hurting many, many things. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu said, إِنَّ الْحُبَارَ تَمُوتُ فِي وَكْرِهَا بِظُلْمِ الظَّالِمِ. That even the bird dies in the nest because of the sins of human beings, their oppression against themselves and against others. The drought is from our own doing. I once said to my Shaykh, AbdAllah bin Bayyah, that the biggest terrorist is nature, because it can do what no terrorist can do. And he said, no, the biggest terrorist is the human being, because nature only does to the human being what the human being deserves. ما أصابتكم من مصيبة إلا بما كسبت أيديكم ويعفو عن كثير. That any affliction that comes to you is from what your own hands have brought. And how much does he forgive? He forgives much. لو يؤاخذ الله الناس بظلمهم. If Allah took human beings to account, ما ترك عليهم من دابة. He wouldn't leave anything left on the earth. The Prophet said, مهلا عن الله. Go easy with your Lord. Because had it not been for the children that are suckling, and for young people with piety, and for animals grazing, he would not have left any of you. So this is something for us to think deeply about, to contemplate. In our tradition, even the Ahlul Kitab are to come out. They're welcome to come out and pray with us, because we're all in this together. We're all in this together. And we need the prayers, we need fasting, we need tawbah. People should be doing things, really, because it affects all of us. It affects our children. If this drought continues, you will see serious consequences to this drought. Already they're starting to show, but they will get worse. There will be rationings of water. People will be forced to ration the water they use in this state. And that's why we need the rain. May Allah give us rain. May Allah forgive us. So we're living in a country that has made many positive strides, undeniably. And we have to acknowledge that. But there are many things that they've gone backwards on. And we see the results of it. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us our sins. I'm going to turn towards the Qibla, make dua. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answer all of our prayers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring rain, inshallah, that nurtures the earth. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك يا عظيم يا كريم يا جبار يا غفار يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. أنت خالق كل شيء، أنت رب العالمين، أنت خلقتنا، أنت رحمتنا، أنت رزقتنا، أنت أكرمتنا، أنت أحسنت إلينا ونحن أسأنا إليك بذنوبنا. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وتب علينا. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وتب علينا. اللهم إن ذنوبنا قد حبست عنا الأمطار ونحن نعترف أمامك يا أرحم الراحمين. إن ذنوبنا قد حبست عنا الأمطار. Our sins have made this water being prevented from us. Oh Allah, forgive us our sins. Allahumma asqi biladana. Give our land water. Give our animals water. Give our children water. Ya Allah, give the innocent among us water. Ya Allah. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وتب علينا. اللهم احيي البلد الميت. اللهم انك قلت واعلم ان الله يحيي الارض بعد موتها. And know that your Lord brings the earth back to life after it's dead. Allahumma show us your signs. Let us see the earth come back to life. We see its death and we know the reason. We know our sins and we ask you forgiveness. Ya Arhamar Rahimin. Allahumma bring this earth back to life. Anta Arhamar Rahimin. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا واغفر المسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات. اللهم لا تؤاخذنا بما فعل السفهاء منا. اللهم لا تؤاخذنا بما فعل السفهاء منا يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم يا رب العالمين يا ملك يوم الدين. اللهم اغفر لنا يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم قلت وقولك الحق استغفروا ربكم إنه كان غفارا يرسل السماء عليكم مدرارا فها نحن نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. اللهم أرسل علينا أمطارا. اللهم أرسل علينا أمطارا يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وتوب علينا إنك أنت التواب. اللهم بارك في حبيبنا سيدنا محمد الذي رفع يديه وكونت السحاب أمام عيون الصحابة يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم كما دعاك يا الله نحن ندعو بسنته في هذا الاستسقاء. اللهم ارزقنا يا الله. اللهم ارزقنا ولا تحرمنا. أنت أرحم الراحمين. اللهم لا تترك أحدا من هذه الجماعة إلا غفرت ذنوبه يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم استر عيوبنا يا الله واغفر ذنوبنا يا الله. اللهم بعد الجرائم والمحرمات من هذه الأرض يا الله. اللهم احفظ شبابهم وردهم إلى طاعة يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم ردهم إلى طاعة يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم نظف قلوبنا وطهر ألسنتنا وآذاننا يا الله. اللهم بعدنا عن الفواحش والمنكرات يا أرحم الراحمين. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك نحمدك ونشكرك ونتوب إليك يا الله. لا إله إلا أنت. اللهم إنا نقول ونحن مسلمون أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. الله بحق هذه الكلمة استجب لنا. إنك قلت ادعوني استجب لكم. اللهم نحن ندعوك فاستجب لنا. سبحانك يا الله لا إله إلا أنت. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين يا رب العالمين.